Chinese press says, the Sixth Middle East War has begun, 5 major suspicions reveal America's plot behind it. And here let's find out what they are saying. Original text of the article: now that the Sixth Middle East War has broken out, the United States, as the world police, has suddenly chosen to remain silent. This makes people wonder, does the United States not care about peace in the Middle East? In fact, the silence of the United States is not that they intend not to deal with this matter, but that they are creating a scam to deceive the whole world. After the war broke out, the whole world's attention was focused on the Middle East. Regardless of the outcome of this war, it will inevitably have a certain impact on the world pattern. The United States is an exception. No matter what the frontline news reports say, the United States has not spoken out in the international community. It seems that they are completely unaware of the war in the Middle East. However, the emergence of 5 doubtful points makes people realize that the United States is actually silent on the surface, and there must be a lot of small actions behind the scenes. The first doubt is that the war broke out suddenly, whether it is the current Russia-Ukraine war or the wars that have broken out around the world in the past. There will be various signs at least some time before the war breaks out. And the armies of both sides will suddenly begin to mobilize, and this time it broke out so suddenly that countries around the world started fighting without even receiving information about the troop movement between Israel and Pakistan. Palestine suddenly launched an attack on Israel, followed by a fierce exchange of fire. The Israeli government only announced that it would begin to mobilize troops to participate in the war after the war broke out. While Gaza is currently at war, Palestine has not sent a large number of troops to participate. Even now that Gaza is being bombed by Israel, Palestine has not come up with any decent air defense weapons to defend itself. It seems that both sides went to war without being ready for a full-scale war. The second doubt is that Israel's current performance is very crotch-free. Until now, Israel has been in a state of being beaten. You must know that before the war broke out, Israel had always suppressed Palestine in terms of military power. At around 7:30 p.m. Beijing time on October 9, international organizations reported that more than 800 Israelis had died in Gaza, while the Palestinian death toll was about 500. You must know that in addition to the obvious casualty gap when Palestine uses terrorist attacks to attack Israel, Palestine is basically the party that suffers heavy losses in Israel's confrontation with Palestine. The third doubtful point is that Iran and Syria have strange attitudes. Although it is currently only a conflict between Palestine and Israel, the two countries Iran and Syria will inevitably be involved due to various issues, but so far, they have been holding back. Judging from past situations, they will still speak to the international community even if they are not ready to join the war, but so far they have not said a word. The fourth doubt is that the Israeli army was unprepared. Before the war broke out, Israel and Palestine had already had many small-scale conflicts, logically speaking. Even if Israel is so arrogant that Palestine does not dare to go to war with itself, it will not be attacked by Palestine as soon as the war breaks out and will always take defensive measures. Palestine launched an attack on Israel at around 7 a.m. on October 7, but Israel waited until the 9th before issuing instructions to encircle Gaza. There was a whole day in between, which meant that during this day, the Israeli army had no orders for any large-scale operations. You must know that in modern warfare, no matter how slow the mobilization of the army is, it cannot take a whole day. India had a conflict with Pakistan in the middle of this year, and it only took half a day to mobilize its troops to the border area. The fifth doubt is why Palestine suddenly launched an attack on Israel. You must know that the Palestinian armed forces are really no match for Israel. Especially at the beginning of this year, in the various minor conflicts between Israel and Palestine, the weapons used by Israel were far more powerful than those of Palestine. If there were not some Palestinian terrorist organizations fighting against Israel, Palestine would really not have the strength to conflict with Israel. In fact, if you look carefully, the war situation that is breaking out now is the favorite war mode of the war that the United States participated in after the end of World War II. First, let the two sides fight to the death. When the side close to the United States really couldn't hold on, the United States intervened in the war with support. Then he began to continuously manipulate the situation, making the party close to him completely his puppet. The United States' silence now is paving the way for future intervention in wars. At the beginning of this year, the United States secretly began to actively provoke the situation in the Middle East. Although the United States has provided a large amount of support to Israel in the past, the support provided by the United States this year is much higher than before. This also gave some militants in Israel the confidence to continue to conflict with Palestine, which also laid the groundwork for the outbreak of war. As long as Israel intensifies its bullying of Palestine, Palestine will naturally not sit still and wait for death. In June, there were many terrorist guerrilla groups formed by militias and local residents in Palestine that clashed with Israel, and as the conflict breaks out more and more, Palestine is constantly trying to find ways to purchase large amounts of weapons and equipment from some black markets or arms dealers. Over time, war will naturally break out. The United States is silent on the surface. In fact, it hopes that the war will be as fierce as possible. It is best to draw the entire Middle East into the war. At that time, the United States can use the slogan of maintaining world peace to enter the Middle East and start a war. There are two main reasons why the United States wants to launch a war in the Middle East. The first is because the Middle East is gradually moving away from the control of the United States. As our country's assistance to the Middle East and the desire for peace among Middle Eastern countries becomes stronger and stronger, various countries in the Middle East have gradually put aside their prejudices and still reject the United States. They know that getting closer to the United States will only lead to the outbreak of war. Now Saudi Arabia, Iran and other countries have begun to continuously reduce cooperation with the United States, especially Saudi Arabia's oil cooperation with the United States. In order to regain control in the Middle East, the United States wants to launch a war to send troops to the Middle East, thereby directly using military threats to control the Middle East. The second reason is for the U.S. debt. There is indeed no obvious risk of a debt crisis in the United States now, but no one can guarantee whether a debt crisis will break out in 2 years. How to eliminate debt is now the top priority of the U.S. government. In the past, EU countries could have been asked to help solve the problem. However, due to the impact of the global epidemic, the economic capacity of the United States has declined, and the EU is now very reluctant to purchase U.S. debt. Therefore, the United States must find some way to increase its deterrence in the international community. As long as the EU countries can see the strength of the United States military power, at that time, whether it is to please the United States or to seek military protection from the United States, the EU will independently purchase U.S. debt. The U.S. debt problem will be resolved, but after all, this is just the plan and idea of the United States. Whether it can be realized or not depends not on the United States but on Iran and Syria, which have not said anything so far. If the conflict is just between Israel and Palestine, then the United States still does not have enough reason to directly send troops. Although this is not a small-scale war, if the United States sends troops, it will arouse the vigilance of the international community and condemn the United States. At that time, the United States may really become the police and must retreat after quelling the war. But why would the United States be willing to do such a thankless thing? The attitudes of Iran and Syria are the key to the direction of the war. If Iran and Syria decide to participate in the war, the entire Middle East will turn into a war. When the time comes for the United States to send troops again, the international community will have no reason to criticize the United States, especially in Syria. There is deep hatred between Syria and Israel. Now is an opportunity for Syria and Israel to go to war. As long as Syria participates in the war, the Middle East will be in chaos. Although Iran has not had a large-scale war with Israel, the entire Middle East is in chaos, and no one can guarantee whether Iran will cause trouble with Saudi Arabia. The main reason why Syria has not said anything yet is that the current situation in their country has not yet stabilized, and there are still strong internal conflicts in the country that have not been resolved. If a war breaks out, civil strife is likely to break out in Syria. As for Syria, they currently do not have enough ability to solve challenges from external forces, so they choose to remain silent for the time being. But if the war situation continues to change in the future, it is difficult to say whether Syria can stabilize the domestic situation. Iran has always been a factor of instability in the Middle East. Although it currently has good relations with countries in both the East and the West in the international community, it is always thinking about how to expand its territory. Many foreign media have always believed that the reason why Iran chose to keep a low profile was to find a suitable opportunity, but if Iran can continue to maintain its attitude of not participating in the war, the scale of the war will not expand, and it may even become a key to the subsequent ceasefire. However, judging from the current situation in the Middle East in the past, as long as either Syria or Iran intervenes in the war, the other side will definitely join the war. By then, the situation in the Middle East will evolve into what the United States most desires to see, and the entire Middle East will fall deeper into the flames of war. Which way will the situation in the Middle East develop? Will the U.S. conspiracy succeed? All this is yet to be determined, but regardless of the final outcome of a war, it will inevitably affect the future situation in the Middle East, and may even pave the way for the next large-scale war. However, the war between Israel and Palestine is absolutely impossible to stop in a short time. Even if both sides intentionally do not want to expand the war, the United States will hinder it. In the name of the world police, it does things that undermine peace. The United States has done so many evil things and will one day reap the consequences. Our video ends here. Remember to subscribe so we can meet again in the next video. Goodbye everyone.